more specifically. And today we'll continue the live stream series I've been doing for a few weeks now, which is building an application with a Spring Data Neo4j 6 backend and then Angular frontend. So we're going to continue working on the frontend today. And before I start the live coding, resume the live coding, I would like to share, as usual, some information that you might find of interest. And so let's share my screen. So as usual, I want to talk about Nodes 2021 because it's such an awesome event. I don't mind repeating it every week. As you may know, the Nodes conference is about meeting all the ecosystem actors around Neo4j and Neo4j products. So it's a great way to learn about new usages, about new products or new releases of existing products, and get up to date and start experimenting with new stuff in the ecosystem. This will happen again this year on June 17. So please just head for neo4j.com/nodes-2021 and basically grab a spot, and we'll be so delighted to see you there. And that's the first part, right? The second part is for this event, of course, we would be delighted and extremely pleased if you were to submit one or several proposals. So you still have some time, a bit less than a month now, the clock is ticking. So yeah, you have till April 5 to submit something. And it can be about anything you've experienced with Neo4j in general, whether you're a data scientist, a developer, maybe a project or product manager. We would like to learn about what you're doing with Neo4j, whether it's something completely new, maybe it's something existing, but with your own perspective. We would really like to hear from you. So in that case, you can head for papercall.io/nodes-2021. So really, we would be so happy to see you attend and submit one or several talks and see your talks there and share your own experience, because you have your own unique perspectives that everyone is eager to learn about. And so, yeah, please bookmark those, browse those, think about it. Feel free to reach out for help if you want some help, submitting and crafting your own proposal. And yeah, so we're happy and eager to see you there. And that being said, so I'm sorry if I'm a bit slower than usual, because I actually woke up 12 hours ago because I drove from my hometown in Normandy back to home near Paris, France. And so yeah, like 4 hours, a bit less than 4 hours driving in the morning before the workday started. Anyhow, let's resume the live coding. And let's get rid of this. And we were with a failing test, as you can see here, and a buggy Google Chrome, but that's solved now. And maybe I will do very quick recap, because I've been doing those every time. So the goal of the application is to allow me and possibly others in the future to have some kind of index of different connectors, Neo4j connectors. And what I mean by connector, it's a project that allows to talk to a Neo4j cluster or single instance. Of course, we have official drivers, as you may know, in 5 languages, so Java, JavaScript, Golang, .NET, and Python. But there are also community projects using the HTTP APIs, or even using the Bolt protocol itself. And part of my job is doing, although I switched from DevRel to the drivers team recently, I'm still doing community outreach as much as I can. And I'm really, curious about what the community is doing and see how we can help them. It can be in terms of documentation, of answering questions about the Bolt protocol or the new JOLT format in the HTTP APIs, for instance, etc., etc. So, identifying on the fly these projects is quite useful to me and to the drivers team in general. And so far, I've been doing it with, I'm a bit ashamed to say, with a spreadsheet. So that's not super high tech, right? So that's what I was thinking. Hey, I would love to do live stream on Spring Data Neo4j 6 because it's a new release of Spring Data Neo4j, which is our only official object graph mapping library at the moment. And it's been released last year, so in around October or November, I think. So version 6. And yeah, I had this idea of an application. I was like, okay, so maybe let's combine the two and start building this application. And I can show real quick the backend, although I'm not going to work on the backend today. And of course, as usual, while I'm opening that project, please ask any questions in the chat. I'll be happy to try to ask. Have the main bit. So it's a standard Spring Boot application here with the Spring controllers and APIs, and the Neo4j stuff for the data layers. And for testing, just using JUnit, test containers, and AssertJ, which is brought by the test starter. So nothing too fancy. You just go to start.spring.io, you can get the same. And then, so let's maybe start with the API this time. I have something very simple for now. I only have the save API. So at some point, I will probably have a read API that will allow me to fetch a list of drivers or list of projects. So far, I've focused on drivers, which is a bit restrictive with the scope of the final application I want to do, because I'm also interested on maybe community object graph mappers, like there is Pine2Neo, developed by Nigel, for instance. So Nigel is a project lead of the team drivers where I work now. But Pine2Neo is not an official project, right? It's a project Nigel started even before joining Neo4j, and it includes an object graph mapper. We also have the GoGAM, or GoGM, in the Golang world, managed by Mindstand and Eric Solander. So we started a live stream, and we'll resume it shortly, by the way, just to continue digging into the usage of Neo4j or this OGM in Golang. And we have a few others, of course, in other languages. And those kind of projects, I would also love, to track them with the application. But for now, I'm starting with a small scope, just to get the ball rolling, so to say, and get, first basic user interface on top of it, and then I can complete the backend later. So as you can see here, I have my API just for saves. So it's a post. It's the post on /driver, and I'm posting a JSON for driver. So driver, what it is? It's so in that case, I'm not using any DTO, data transfer objects. I'm using the entity as well for the transport part, for the API part, because I don't need anything else at the moment. I don't need any indirection. So if I can avoid indirection, I'm all for it. So what's a driver? It's a URI. So you can think of a GitHub URI, for instance, or GitLab, or what have you for Git hosting, or Git or something else, actually. Whether it's official or not, whether it's part of the 5 drivers I mentioned before, for Java, JavaScript, Go, Python, and .NET, or not, and what kind of transport it supports. And what's a transport? A transport, it can support many transports, as you can see, because it's a list. And a transport is either HTTP or Bolt. And in case of Bolt, so this second attribute only makes sense for Bolt at the moment. So the design is arguably bad, but at least it's easy to do. So versions, in that case, for Bolt, you have Bolt version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and soon 4.3. And so some languages, of course, some projects might not be completely up to date. Some might be stuck at Bolt 3 or Bolt 1. It all depends because it's not necessarily obvious when you start how to. Also, the documentation is great now. It's not always trivial to implement a Bolt driver, especially if you're not used to, connecting over raw TCP and exchanging message payloads like that. So that's why it might take some time to actually understand how to upgrade and support newer Bolt versions. which is why I thought about adding this. And that's also a great indicator of whether a project is usable for a given Neo4j version, because depending on what bolt version it supports, then we know already, we can map that directly to the Neo4j product itself. So let's say if in a particular language we know that the only driver we have for bolt is stuck at version 2, then we'll know you cannot go beyond, I don't know, 4j 3.2 or 3.3. I don't know it from the top of my head, but that's an important information to know. And so that Neo4j driver, as you can see, is annotated with the object graph mapper annotation, so Spring Data Neo4j 6. So it's a node because it's mapped, each instance it's mapped to a specific node for which the primary label is going to be driver. It will have a technical ID managed by the framework through this UUID generator. So that way it will implement a UUID for me. And then it will also manage, graph traversals for me, checking support relationships and fetching transports with that. And interestingly, so that's the relationship properties. You can, of course, as we've seen, so have the target node, and you can add properties if you want. So it's a relationship with properties with basically the end node. And finally, one interesting thing in this driver transport is using a natural ID. That's why I don't have any generated value, because those are supposed to be populated. And that way, I will only have one node for HTTP and one node for bolt. I mean, I still have to define constraints to actually enforce that, because that's not completely guaranteed at the moment. But yeah, that's something that probably a specific stream I will do about this, introducing, migrations. Because we have at least, at the top of my head, I know at least 3 ways of doing migrations. So with the liquid-based plugin, which is something completely new, the ancestor liquid graph, which I also created, or the project called DB Migrations by my colleague Michael Simon, who also maintains Spring Data Neo4j with Gerrit Meyer. So yes, that's our entities, that's our domain. And the way it works, if we go back to the API, you see there is this driver repository, which will expose persistence operations. And if you look currently, so the interface here is completely empty, so it does not expose anything but this one, which is safe, because that's only what I need right now. So currently, my API only exposes save operations, and that's it. There is nothing else that it supports. And that's great, because that's all I want at the moment. If I want to add stuff, I could either use the other sub-interfaces such as CRUD repository or others, but for now, I'd rather manually select the ones I actually need, instead of exposing a bunch of things that are not necessarily meant for consumption yet. And that's our backend. And just a quick note on test, we're using, so not here, but rather here, we're using test containers. So we can stand up a Docker container with Neo4j 4.2 in that case, but it could be made configurable. I'm injecting the repository I want to test, using Neo4j templates to have something independent of the repository to prepare data and remove data if needed for cleanup and for test preparation. And the way to configure Spring Data Neo4j is quite simple. You just need those 3 properties, and you can extract them via this very nice dynamic property source, which is a new addition of Spring Framework. So you can configure the application context on the fly. And it will, in my case, I need to read the value from the Neo4j container, because the local port is completely dynamic. It's bound to the fixed port of the container, but the exposed port on my local machine is completely random. So I cannot guess it in advance. That's why I need to do these kind of things. And of course, I could have configured a custom admin password, which is not the case here, but in any case, I still get the default. I still get the actual effective password. So, 3 lines of code, I mean, actually 6 lines of code to get the configuration working with the container. So that's great, because very little code to write, and I already get, with this add containers annotation, the add container here, and this. So that is, by the way, those annotations are JUnit 5 only. If you're using JUnit 4, you will have to do it a bit differently. But that's still very, very useful and super concise to write. So it's very, very nice developer experience here. And cherry on the cake, when you are on start.spring.io, if you say you're working with Neo4j and test containers, it will automatically add the Neo4j module authored by Michael Simon. So that is actually super great because the Neo4j module here, this Neo4j container, does all the right things for you, like waits for the right logs to show up to know that the bolt port is open and ready to accept connections, etc., etc. So that makes the code even more concise than it would be with a standard generic container from test containers. And all right, so that's our backend. It's all very nice, but now let's go to our failing tests in the front end. So far. So I focused on one specific test because I switched gears. I changed my mind at the last minute in the last stream. When I have this concept of versions, like a driver supports some kind of protocol, like Bolt and/or HTTP. But as I was telling you, Bolt is actually a different beast depending on the version you're talking about. So I also want, so instead of hard coding that directly into my component, so the component, it's like the controller, so to say, between that manages, that reconciles states and markup. So state as in whatever comes from services, and markup as in HTML. And instead of hard coding it in the HTML directly, I was thinking, maybe at some point I will probably have a specific server, a call to my server to retrieve the both versions, because that's not something I want to hard code, maybe. So for now, I'm going to do the halfway solution, which is I'm going to encapsulate this transport retrieval in a service, so in an Angular service. And what's a service in Angular terms? It's usually something that interacts with the outside world, like a server, usually. It could be anything. It could load files, etc., etc. And so what I'm going to do and what I'm trying to do right now with this test, so let me go full screen for a second, is so I have, if I look real quick, you see I have the HTTP mock because I had, the call. I started 2 streams ago, I believe, implementing the actual save operations, but I've not used it yet. I will use it soon. And then while I was working on the component the other week, so last week, I realized, hey, maybe I could also have this wrapping of transports that I would get kind of dynamically. So dynamically, I don't know, it's a new word. I don't know if it makes any sense. But anyway, instead of hard coding completely. So that way, the day I want to switch to a server call, I would just have to change my service. I won't have to change my component, which is great. So I already defined Neo4j transport, which is for now a minimal class with public fields for now, because that was a bit lazy. So now let's go back to these tests, because I will have to use implementation. So whenever I call get available transport and I subscribe to it, because it's an observable, it's RxJS or reactive JavaScript, then I expect to receive a message that is a bunch of transports. And I expect to receive all of these in that specific order. So of course, currently so if we launch the tests, and that's also why, as I say at every stream, it's nice to start with a failing test, because then you remember what you have to do. So at the end of your day, try to write a failing test for the feature you're working on. And then the next day, you and maybe you and your pair can resume work without, thinking about for hours about what you should work on. And so you can see here that there's been a timeout. Why? So because I'm telling Jasmine, actually Karma, sorry, the Karma runner or whatever, or Jasmine API or whatever, that it should be done when the callback has been called, basically. And if not, it will wait up until the timeout. And that's exactly what happens here. It waits by default for 5 seconds, so 5,000 milliseconds. And here, because the callback here, this callback is never called, then done is not called, then the test never completes. Which is kind of obvious in retrospect. If we look at the implementation, we return an observable with nothing in it. So basically, we don't emit any messages, so we're never gonna receive any when we subscribe. So of course, our callback will never be called, because the callback is called every time there is a message. So in that case, that's going to be quite easy, because that's going to be the exact same thing for now. So that's my halfway solution, as well as I was telling you. I'm going to hard code the transports, but not in the component, in the service instead. And then when I want to switch to a server call, I will have to implement. Maybe I will even persist it in the graph. Maybe I will hard code it on the server at first and then move it to the persistence, to the database. But then it won't be a front-end problem anymore. Cool, now the test passes, so I can defocus it. Is that a word, defocus? I'm not sure. And I should have still a failing test because I'm working on my component. Yes. And my component, so I was working on the markup only at this point. I have not, wired the service to call it when the form is submitted, and that's something we're gonna do today. And as you can see, well, it does not work. So let's dig in why. And I can actually focus the test as well because I don't need to run everything. And if we go here, focus it for a while, just until we fix it, you can see that that's a test failing, and we can see there is, we expect 1 to 3, 0 to 6 to be, all the versions here. Actually, don't know why it's probably been reformatted and it's not great. So let me do that. All right. Except it's not happy, but no, okay, cool. And as usual, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me on the chat, whether you're on YouTube, on Twitch, I'm happy to try to answer them. So what am I doing here exactly? So I'm testing the markup in a light way, because again, I don't want my test to blow up if the markup changes a lot. So I'm doing really the minimum. And if we look at the markup, so let's move it maybe here. I have a simple form for now that's obviously not complete to work with Angular, but that's a start. So we have my form that will allow me to save new projects that I see in the wild. It will talk to my backend at some point, save it, and then persist it into my Neo4j database. And for now, so we're checking the form. It is there, so that's the first assertion. It's great, it works. Then inputs, I should have 2 because I have the URI and the official one, which is actually a checkbox because it's either official or not. Then supported transport, that's when it starts to fail. So basically, I'm taking based on this form element here, I'm checking the descendant nodes. I'm checking all selects. So the select should be there. So that is not an issue. This first assertion here passes. But then based on this dropdown, I'm taking all the options. And all the options should be there. And if I extract the text, excluding the empty one, I should have all of this. And that's when it fails. Because obviously, right now, I only have one. Option which is empty. I don't fetch the transports, the versions. So let me just see real quick. So we will use a service which will return a Neo4j transport, which has a type and a version. All right. So let's do this. So to fix it, we'll have to have some kind of transport. So we'll have to iterate over some kind of field. So we'll need an option that we will repeat. And that should work better. So what you do this ng4 thing. And except it will probably be a bit more complex, but let's start with some basic code and fix it iteratively. So I want transport. So I will iterate over transport, which does not exist yet. So of course it's going to fail. And then the value will be maybe I will call display transport, which does not exist yet either. Yeah, I cannot type today. That's nice. I think I say that at every stream as well. Anyway, so I will have something like this. Okay, so 2 problems to solve. Let's start with the easy one, which is how do I define display transport? And that's, your template is by default bound to your component, so it can see public methods of your component. So I mean app component.html, and I should probably rename app at some point because it's not the whole app. Well, actually, currently it is, but so I should have this display transport that should return me a string. So it takes transport, which is actually called what? Driver transport? Yeah. And it should return a string. And so what should we do? If transport dot value and type, right? Or am I missing something? Oh, wrong thing. It's Neo4j. Oh, yeah, the naming kind of sucks at the moment, to be honest. If you have a better naming, so there is a transport which includes the name and the version versus driver transport, which is just the type. Yeah, actually, yeah, maybe that's actually a right name. That's driver transport type. Thanks. I was a bit stuck with naming the other day, but I kind of like to have this instead. Nice. So we have a driver transport. It returns a string. If transport is a version is null because it's a string or it's null, then we'll just return the type. Else, oh yeah, we need semicolons. I don't know, it's just a language confusion in my brain. Transport, we can probably do something like this. Transport dot type space transport dot value. So that's a fancy newish syntax string interpolation in JavaScript and TypeScript. So that's kind of nice. Cool. So that should help for this part, but then there is, oh, but where does transport come from? That's a great question. And so we will start answering that partly. We will need to introduce a constructor through the magic of dependency injection, because any service is actually injectable. If we look at driver service, it's injectable. So I can retrieve it. It will, Angular will be able to introspect the constructors of your classes. And so I should have a driver service. And then what I'm interested in is subscribing to it. But we'll do this in a specific way. So we're gonna have supported transport, which is driver service, get available transport. As simple as that. Of course, it does not compile yet, because I'd rather write the code I want before, having all the ceremony and boilerplate. That's always how I do, which is also why I start with testing. That's my preferred workflow, I would say. So now we have this, and as a convention, it's quite common, I believe, at least it was 3 years ago, I don't think it has changed, to use some kind of Polish notation. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Polish notation. Do I have a browser around? Nope. When you use some kind of syntax to infer in the naming of your variables to tell about the type. So if I don't know if there is an example of that. Oh, no, sorry, Polish notation. I'm wrong. It's Hungarian notation. Polish notation is about some kind of Lisp way to write arithmetic operations. Is it Hungarian notation? Anyway, I digress, but you can see that in, let's see. Yeah, you basically include some kind of hint in the variable name for the types, which was useful probably 30 years ago when the IDE were very primitive and you didn't have syntax highlighting. But nowadays it's kind of useless. But that's a convention in the Angular world. So prefixing with $ kind of implies, so it's some kind of Hungarian notation here to imply that it's an observable and not a regular type. And so that's almost it, except I still doesn't give me a transport, right? So for this we're gonna do something, and I'm gonna explain it a little bit in detail. Although I'm definitely no expert, but So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce an element called nj container. And the advantage of this is you can add some, star ng stuff in there without introducing another element in the resulting HTML. So your HTML won't be bloated with, elements that are just there for having Angular logic. So that's a great way to avoid to bloat your HTML. And so what we're going to do here, we're going to do something like this. And we're almost there, no worries. And what we're going to do is we're gonna do something like this. And do something like this with this. So this refers to the component. And we can alias this to give it a better name. And I will talk about the bypassing real soon. And that's how we get our transports. And for some reason, it's complaining. Oh yeah, because it needs to be public. Otherwise, the template cannot see it. And so, what does bypassing do? As you've seen in the driver service test, when you've got an observable, you need to subscribe to it, right? And when you're done, let's say your component, you refresh the page or you go to another component, you would ideally unsubscribe from it. So when you call subscribe, you get a subscription, and then from the subscription, you can close it, which will release any underlying resources. I could do this directly in the component. I could, instead doing this, I could call again the driver service. I could have something like this, and then subscribe, and then do some things, and, having transports, and maybe assign transports in there. I'm not going to do it till the end, but I could do this and then use transports in my template, and instead of doing this bypassing thing. But then if I do this, I need also to, remember the subscription. So I would also need to do this. And then I would need, oh yeah, but if my component is being destroyed because the user has changed the page, I would need to do on destroy. And then, so you don't have to actually explicitly implement it, but it's better to do it. It's more type safe, I would say. You would have to call, oh, if I have a subscription, so if subscription, yeah, except I cannot type, it does not exist yet, of course. I would have to do this, and then would have to write a bunch of code that is really easy to miss, and it's super hard to test actually the subscription closing on destroy. It's not super easy to write it, to test it naturally. And so you would have to do something like, so I don't remember if I look at subscription, I think there is a close or a destroy method or something. If we go to it, I think there is unsubscribe, sorry, unsubscribe. So you would need to do this. That's actually kind of important to do, because that's the way you release resources. Otherwise, you could run out of resources and your application could crash. And so I still have to write all of this, which is super annoying. Oh, it's okay. And even then, if I do this, these transports, there would be some time period during which transports would not be initialized yet, right? So I would probably need to have some kind of special value. So maybe something like transports is an empty array, and then, and then wait for blah, blah, blah. And then I will have this logic when, oh, I need, maybe there is a case where it's nil or undefined, blah, 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 and then I will miss it. So that's a lot of code. So instead of doing that, and probably, it's kind of error prone to have to write all of this, it's easy to forget, I'm using bypassing, and I don't need on destroy. Nice. I like when my screen switches off for a few seconds. It does that on a regular basis nowadays. I have no idea why. And so sorry. And I was saying, instead of doing all of what I've written, you just need to do bypassing, and the unsubscription will be automatically managed for you as well. And so you don't have to think about, oh, what's the initial value before the subscription callback is called and blah, blah, blah. You just do this, it works fine. And you don't have to worry about resource releases during unsubscription, etc. So it's much nicer, much more recommended. If you cannot do this, of course, you have to resort to using it in the components directly instead of using this bypassing. But it's highly recommended, and whenever I can, I use that because that's less code to write, less error prone, and it does the right thing for you. And of course, you can just do it. And I don't only need to undestroys because I just get the observable, and that's it. I don't do anything with it. The subscription is managed by the framework via this Piper thing. So that's great. And so if I do that now, the test might still fail a little bit because I believe I'm using a mock of the service and I have not defined what the mock should do when I call get available transport. And for some reason, it seems to be sleeping. So please wake up, dear test runner. Or maybe I have some issue with Chrome again. Okay, so it fails, it fails, it fails. No provider for each. Okay, so now actually I was not using driver service until now, and because I've not told. So let's go back to let's close all of this, or maybe the rest, and go back to the test. By default, if I don't specify, so as you can see, my component needs a driver service now, and by default, if I don't tell the test bed, so the application context, so to say, how to retrieve it, it will try to get the real thing. And of course, if it tries to get the real thing, it will need an HTTP client, which is not something I want to do in a unit test. I don't want to have actual HTTP calls. So to that end, we'll have to do the usual. We'll have to use a mock. And the way we use a mock is with the provider syntax. So you can say for given a specific type, please use this specific value. So the way we do is for this specific type, so that provide, and in my case that's driver service, please use the values. There are actually other attributes, right? You can use other things, but that's my favorite way of doing things and the most familiar one, which is usually the same for me because I'm a bad developer, I know. Then I can create a spy and make it return whatever I want. You know, just for fun, instead of using the actual implementation values, just to make it very clear that it's just a test with a mock, let's do something fun. So transports will be spaceships and maybe what could be fun? Skateboard. Yeah, that's not very fun, but you know, trying my best here. And we'll have a driver service, which does not exist yet, so we just have to do it. So we use the Jasmine create spy object for driver service. We'll mock, for now, only the get available transport. So if we go here, this one. Of course, at some point, we'll have to mock save because we don't want actual HTTP calls in unit tests. That's a service concern. That's not a component concern. So that's my driver service by, and yeah, I might just put it here because right now it's kind of big. And then I can return dummy stuff. So get available transports and return value. So that's an observable, so I need to return an observable of an array of things, which I'm going to do right now. So import statement, thank you very much. Driver service spy, sorry. And in that case, I need to do some driver transport things, right? Yes. So one will be just hello. Oh yeah, import. Thank you. And version. Okay. And by default, it's null. Great. So I will have spaceship. And I will have skateboard, I believe. And the version will be 4.0. But who doesn't want skateboard 4.0? And that way now it's going to use spy because I tell the application context, which is called testbed in the case of in a test context, to use that. Then it might still fail for another reason, but we'll see about this real quick. So it is still failing. And as I explained last week, that's because we are in a unit test. And when we are not in a unit test, Angular, does this two-way data binding. So whenever there is a change in the markup, it will bubble up to your component state, and vice versa. If there is a change in your component state, it will be reflected on the markup. That's what happens in production. But in unit tests, you actually have to be explicit about those to tell Angular, please now start a change detection cycle. Because we need that actually. Because there is this observable that has changed since the initial rendering of the template. So we need to tell Angular in a unit test context, hey, by the way, can you please trigger the detect change cycle so that you will see there are new values and you should generate those two options here. And so if we do just that, let's see. So basically before we check the form, we should do this. And it should just run fine, crossing fingers, unless I miss something. Oh yeah, except a typo, of course, because I meant spaceship. And now the test passes. So to recap, what I've added now is instead of hard coding the option right here, I'd say, yeah, let's go with the service. That's much nicer. The service returns an observable, so that way it can change, that's nice. And of course, I just moved the hard coding part to the service implementation, so that's one step away from the component. Maybe it will move out of the front end completely at some point. And then based on that, I just retrieve the handle to the observable, and I manage all the subscription with this pipe async thing, which will do all the right things like the unsubscription, etc., etc. And then I can, with this dummy markup element, so it won't generate any extra DOM, and we can check in a second. Once we start the application, you will see there is no ng container, or there is no div, or some kind of meaningless, semanticless elements in there. So that does not bloat your markup. So that's super great because you can still attach Angular logic to it. And then, so I will subscribe to it, and I can iterate over transports and just call my display transport, which is just say there is a version, displays the type and the version, otherwise just displays the type. Very nice, very nice. So just to make sure we didn't break everything, let's unfocus this and run all the tests again. And all the test passes, and let's have a look at our very, very beautiful graphical user interface. So I believe there is a start script, yes, which call ng-serve. That's what Angular generates by default. There are default scripts that come for free whenever you bootstrap a new application, so start, build, test, etc. Oh, I should use the lint before testing, because I always forget to run it otherwise. And fixing a gazillion linting errors after the fact is always super annoying. So because I never forget to run tests, I tend to use lint at the same time. It's a bit slower, but at least I'm making sure I don't forget about linting. And if we look at this beautiful UI, of course, it crashes for some reason. Let's see why. Why did I forget? No provider for HTTP client, which is also why we should always run it once, just to make sure we don't forget something obvious. Actually, an end-to-end test would have, if I had run end-to-end test here, I would have seen the application would not boot properly. So I don't even have to start the actual application. I should run the end-to-end application, which actually will start the application, but anyway. So let's go to the main configuration. Yeah, I'm not going to write an end-to-end test right now because I just don't want to do it. You should do it. It's a good thing to do. I just don't want to do it. Just not in the mood. And yeah, thank you for the spam comment, by the way. Very, very useful. Anyway, So yeah, we'll need to import, I believe, the HTTP something module, HTTP client module sounds good to me. And if the application restarts automatically, yes, perfect. Here we go. It reloaded automatically, and we have this, oh my god, so beautiful UI with a field, a checkbox, and a multi-select, because you can have multiple versions, of course. That's great. That's perfect. So next part. So what could we do? We could either tackle the save part right away, work on validation. Also, we have only 15 minutes left. I guess we could start with the save stuff because that's the most important part. And then validation, I can either skip it. Also, you should do it in real life. Angular has very nice validation facilities, which of course does not should not prevent you from validating on the server side, because client-side validation is never enough. So yeah, let's maybe try to start working on the wiring the form submit to the save call. And so let's see how we do that. And let me check on Slack. Maybe someone is telling me that my stream is horrible and I should stop. All right. So let's have a cheat sheet I am currently looking at. I must be honest with you guys. I don't remember everything by heart. So how does it look like? How does it look like? I have a form. At some point, I will do on submit, of course, and on submit happens where? So I'm gonna cheat. Usually I test drive everything. For this one, I'm gonna probably start with not test driving it, but mostly debug driving it. So I have this, which in turn I have a group. How does it look like? Just checking real quick. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. So I will need to bind my fields to some variables that don't exist yet, and that will be my driver. I'm gonna go call it driver form for now. For like, again, driver is not a great name, but that's kind of pervasive at the moment. So any good suggestion in the chat, apart from spammy comments, are obviously welcome. And then so I can start with that maybe. That should probably be a good start. So that will actually, so let's generate this. It will be what's called a form group, and that's when I can do validation, etc. And let's see, did I break anything just by doing this change? At least I can try to not break my tests. That would be awesome. Oh yeah. And so it's complaining about, so for now I'm just gonna run the tests. I think it should complain about the same thing. Or maybe first it would complain about the lack of form module import, but we'll see about that. No, same problem, of course. So I need to assign it, right? I need to initialize it, sorry. So this driver form will be, I will need a form builder, which will allow me to declaratively tell what my form is made of. So I'm going to use that. Form builder. Right. So I have a group of fields, basically. And I can probably, for now, leave it. Yeah, let's leave it empty and see what happens. And wait, makes the lint happy as well. Yeah, actually I like to split like this. Okay. Oh, now it's kind of blowing up completely. Yeah, it doesn't know form builder, so that's a very verbose way of telling me, hey, what's form builder? How do I get this? So that's in the tests. So in the tests, I need to import the Form testing module, I think. Nope. Form module. Let me check real quick my cheat sheet. What do I import there? What do I import? Reactive form. Yeah, forms module should be fine then. So it's just a regular module. And let's see. There is no test facility for forms as far as I know. Still complaining about form builder. So maybe it's the other one. Reactive form builder, forms module. Let's see. Yes, okay, that was the other one. Cool. So I have this form builder, that's all great. And then I have this, and then I should start doing on submit stuff. But first I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm just gonna watch what happens when I do submit to make sure it actually looks like something I expect, because I'm not fully sure. Why is it unhappy by any applicable blah 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 blah. Property form group is not provided by any applicable directive nor by form element. Not sure what this is about, to be honest. That's interesting. We'll see if that's a big problem. Anyway, we'll start the app to see what happens. And then we'll do this event binding. And I will do something like this. Oops, except I cannot type. That's completely cheating, by the way. I'm just checking out what I've done before, and that's how I get by. So of course, if I did something wrong before, I will perpetuate this. It's not a good idea. Don't do it. Don't do it at home. Read the docs, but reading docs in a live stream is not necessarily super interesting. So I will keep this. For now, it's void because I don't plan to do anything. I'm just gonna be lazy and see what's in there. All right. So this worries me a little bit. Oh, wait, I think I know why, because I've not configured, well, let's see the application fail first before trying to fix some future problems. I don't like future problems, I like current problems. I'd rather solve current problems instead of trying to imagine what can come up. Let's see. Error occurs in the template of app components. Yeah, so it's complaining about this. So let me combine to form group. I'm gonna Google this. Sorry guys, but not sure what this is about. Always a painful part for me. So yeah, right. Stack Overflow. Import from Angular forms in your controller and add it to directives. Say what? Yeah, so I need to do that for sure. So I will do it. And add it to directives in your what? Not sure what the first part means, but yeah, of course I need to do this for sure in application module. So I was planning on doing that. Wait, I've already done it. Yeah, because it's a reactive one I'm interested about. Maybe I need both, but let's see. Does it help? Yes. Cool. And then let's see. Oh yeah, our application in there. So let's see what happens when we submit stuff. I've not added a submit button, but I believe if I just, if I just do this, and this, yeah, let's take everything but the last one. If I do that, nice, an empty object. So not exactly working as it should. And I think it's because, if I remember well, it's because I should declare the fields here. So it knows which fields I'm supposed to bind to the state, to the form state. I think, again, that's speculation at this point because I don't do this every day. So let me check real quick. So I will have what? If let's move that here, I will have a URI. Oh no, I'm not gonna pass any specific validators or anything. Oh, actually don't need the quotes. My headphones are falling. I have official and I have transport. So actually in there you can put several validators. And someone is asking about ISP.NET MVC, so using the .NET driver, do we have videos for that? I don't think we have. I might plan them later with my colleague Andrew Heap, who's working on the .NET driver, which might do that in the future. I don't believe we have. You should Google in YouTube if you search in YouTube something like .NET Neo4j.NET driver, you might see some usage, usually by Chris Carden or Andrew Heap. But yeah, we can definitely plan on that once the series is done. I have several topics I want to cover, including showing drivers in other languages. We have examples, though, just real quick. If you go to Neo4j examples, we have, so it's with .NET Core, so I've not updated the classic traditional .NET example, but there is a newer one with .NET Core. So if you go to .NET examples, let me show the question, by the way, so that everyone can see. And if you look for movies, you have in various languages and connectors. And you can see, for instance, there is .NET Bolt, which has been updated a few months ago. And there is another one. So if you write .NET Core is the one I actually recently added. So you can see examples. I mean, it's a basic application every time. It's the same movie dataset you can install with Neo4j Desktop. And so you can see a solution, a .NET solution with some code using the driver. Same thing with .NET Core, with a more homogeneous structured. So if you go to JavaScript Bolt, you would see the same kind of structure, etc., etc. So you can at least browse the movies repositories, Neo4j examples, and that should give you an example. It's not a video. We might do that at some point this year, I hope. But yeah, not now. Today it's about Spring Data Neo4j 6 and so in Java and Angular. So that might come later. Hope that answers your question. And maybe wait, I'm gonna just post a link to that and to answer your question properly. Let me go back here. Movies, just with movies. Oh man, I'm just having big fingers today. Yeah. So let me answer for our YouTube user. All right, done. I hope it helps, by the way. And so let's go back to our nice little front end. So I added this real quick just so it knows which fields I'm supposed to bind to my state. I think that's what it's supposed to do here. And hopefully when I submit, I should see some data. So let's go back. Let's refresh. Let's write some stuff, official driver and whatever. Okay, almost. It's better. I see there are now these three fields, but it doesn't bind those to any value, so I might be missing something else. Let's see. Let's see. What do I need to do? Something else maybe on the. So I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. I might need something. Oh yeah, I need probably this form control name or something. This Angular attribute. So yeah, let me try that. That should help Angular figure out where those fields are. Again, I'm not completely sure. I'm a bit improvising based on what I've done in the past, because that's not something I do every day. So let's try again, and this time with the form control name. Let's see. So the application should reload magically. Yes, writing some values. And Yay! I see values now because I needed to tell Angular and with the arrays and stuff. So that is perfect, perfect, perfect. Cool. So I think we'll stop there from now. The next step next week will be to add some. Maybe I will add some validation at the same time or not. I will bind this up unsubmit to the saves, to the driver service save, so that I will finally wire my front end with the backend. And that will force me to solve an issue I've been postponing for a while, which is if you look at the service implementation right here. Let me close the rest. You can see that I'm assuming it's on the same host and same port. And there is actually a way to achieve that when you're running the application locally. Of course, you can do that with any cloud provider. That's kind of the routing basic facilities of any cloud provider. But locally, of course, that doesn't work because my Spring Boot application starts on port 8080 and my front end on 4200 by default. So I will need to tell Angular to proxy the backend to the same port. And it's actually very easy. It's just hidden. It's not a super known configuration, I believe. At first, I was using nginx locally to actually achieve the same configuration, which was a bit annoying. But Angular supports a proxy server, as we will see probably next week, because I'm going to need that to actually test it in real life. That's a server, that's a wiring between the front end and the back end works. So thanks for joining. Thanks for your questions. And I will see you next week at the same time. So 5 p.m. CET, which I believe is 2 a.m. PST, and 8 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States of America, I think. I'm not completely clear. But yeah, 5 p.m. CET, that's for sure. And so, yeah, see you next week. Feel free to brainstorm your Notes 2021 proposals. We would love to see you there. So, yeah, I will see you later. Thank you and bye-bye.